This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by ProXPN, the virtual private network service. Protect your internet by securing your connection and get up to 50% off by visiting proxpn.com and using the offer code VOICES. And by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Learn more and download yours at takecontrolbooks.com. Welcome to MacNotables on MacVoices. This is the Talk in the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, our next MacNotable has not been here for quite a while. I'm so happy to have him back because it just seems like we never get to talk anymore. Mr. Dan Frakes. Dan, it's great to see you.
How you doing, Chuck? Good to be here.
I'm great, and I'm so glad to get you back on the line. It's been way too long, and I don't know what happens. I guess we just both get busy and time slips by.
We have stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think you may have a little more stuff than I do, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, we both got a lot of stuff. I'm not gonna take credit for missing. Yeah, no, take all the credit. Yeah.
So you're still hanging out at the Wirecutter.
That's right. Yep.
That's good. And this is it's sort of the same kind of gig, but it's a little bit different because you do a lot of in-depth stuff at the Wirecutter. That's what I love about it. You don't just hit the topic and kind of bounce off. You dig in deep until there's nowhere else to dig. Yeah,
we're basically just all reviews. My previous gig over at Macworld, I did a lot of how-tos, reviews, opinion, those kind of, the whole gamut. But Wirecutter, we are mostly reviews.
Okay, so what kind of things have I know folks can go to the Wirecutter and see what they do, but what have you been working on that is exciting that from an Apple perspective?
Well, after I just got done telling you, it's mostly reviews. The biggest thing we did recently on my beat was a how-to. So we teamed up with the New York Times and we examined ways to make your smartphone battery last longer. So we all see on Facebook or from emails forwarded from relatives about do this to make your phone's battery last longer. And those of us who kind of are a little tech savvy, we read those things and a lot of times we say, that doesn't work at all. I know that doesn't work. Or you should really do this. And so we decided to try to figure out which ones actually work and which ones don't. And so we paired with the New York Times and we spent really a couple months with a bunch of different phones, testing various things to see the effect they had on battery life, and then we published a short version on the New York Times website a couple weeks ago. And then after that, we published sort of our full report on Wirecutter that has all the recommendations and all the myths and all the things that you can and shouldn't do to make your phone last longer.
Were you primarily working on the iPhone side, or did you use multiple phones?
No, we had 3 or 4 people doing testing, and we used probably 4 or 5 different iPhones, and I don't want to say maybe a half dozen different Android phones. So we were trying to make it cross-platform. We did notice, when there were big differences between iPhone and Android, but for the most part, there's just as much variance between Apple devices as there are between Apple and Android devices. So the gist was, if you've got a recent smartphone, what can you do? And so we tested, a few dozen different things and trying to control each time for other factors so that when we were testing, say, the effect of turning Bluetooth off, we were testing only the effect of Bluetooth rather than all these other things that go on at the same time.
Is this one of those articles where, okay, you can do these things to help an iPhone, these to help an Android phone, and then these things to help both? Or is it a pretty universal kind of strategy that no matter what phone you're using?
For the most part, they're similar. We did some tests with AirPlay on the iPhone side because there is no AirPlay on Android. But for the most part, the results are similar, or the recommendations are similar. Your results might differ a few percentage points here or there, or in some cases maybe a little more than a few. But the overall trend was the same regardless of the platform. The same kind of things use the most battery, the same kind of things don't really help. And so it ended up being easier than we expected to make recommendations for and against things.
All right, not going to ask you to recite the whole article here, but give us a quick idea of some simple things that folks might be able to do to improve their iPhone battery life.
Well, if I, what will help each person really varies depending on how they use their phone. But the number one battery suck on any modern cell phone is the screen. So the GPS circuitry is up there too, in terms of if you were using something that was actively hitting the GPS radio over and over and over, but very few things do that. Maybe like a run keeper or something that's tracking your precise position for an hour run, that uses a lot. But for the most part, the thing that uses the most battery power is your screen. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. It's big, it requires a lot of light, but people kind of forget that when they're using their phone, the screen is a huge thing, right? They're like, oh, well, I'm just using my phone. That's what it does, right? But by reducing the brightness on your phone, for example, you can actually save a huge amount of battery power. And so our number one recommendation was actually, apart from don't use your phone as much, is turn your screen down. And you don't even have to do that manually. I mean, if you really want to, if you're like, the ultra milers are the people who get in their cars and try to get like every last mile per gallon out of it, and so they like coast everywhere and they accelerate really slowly. If you're one of those people, you can turn your brightness down on your phone all the way to the bottom and just live that way. But it makes it hard to see in brighter lights or during daylight and stuff. So all the modern phones, including the iPhone, of course, they have an auto brightness setting, which will automatically increase the brightness in bright light and lower it in dark and dim environments. And just that setting alone can make a huge difference in how much battery power your phone uses over the course of a day. So that was like probably the number one and the easiest thing to do, because you just flip a switch and then your phone pretty much takes care of it for you. Another one that we thought that we actually were surprised about was using an ad blocker. I mean, we all know that when you're browsing a web page, ads on the web page, they're data, right? You have to download them, you have to display them. But we were shocked at how much of a difference it made. We used an automated web browsing script that would go every few minutes. It would switch to a new web page, load it, display everything on the page, wait a couple minutes, and then go to another one. And so we did that for like an hour, 2 hours straight, just to see how much extended web browsing used from your battery. And then we did the same thing, but we added an ad blocker. So most of the advertisements were stripped out. And it turns out that ads make your web browser use twice as much battery power as no ads. So if you are doing an hour-long web browsing session, an ad blocker will cut your battery use in half.
Wow, that's a surprise.
Yeah, and it was on both platforms. In fact, it was even bigger than half on the Android phones we tested, but across the board, it was at least half. And that was kind of shocking. I mean, most of the discussion around internet ads has been around on the publisher side, revenue, and on the reader side, just annoyance, right? But it turns out that it's actually using a lot of your battery too. If you're just doing 5 minutes of web browsing, not a big deal. But if you're doing, if you tend to sit there and like browse the web for an hour, that's, you're going to save 50% of your battery.
Yeah, I've on the user side, I know when I've played with the ad blockers, I see a notable increase in speed of loading and everything, and that's that's to be expected because you're not loading as much information. Honestly, I never gave any thought to the idea that it might be chewing up my battery.
Yeah, we kind of heard an offhand reference to it, and we're like, let's try it. And then we did it, and we were like, really? So we tested it again, and we repeated it on different phones, and across the board, we were pretty shocked. So, it's going to depend on which ad blocker you use. We were noticing that sort of every time an ad blocker gets updated, it sort of will pass the other ones, and then another one will get updated and pass it in terms of the performance or how efficient it is. But the differences between the various good ad blockers for iOS is very small compared to the amount you'll save by using any of them.
Do you mind naming a couple of the ones that you were working with, or would you prefer not to?
No. I use Purity on my phone as well as OneBlocker. OneBlocker is the one that we ended up doing our tests with because at the time we started it, it had gotten really good ratings from a few places that compared them, and so that's the one we used. But there's there's probably 30 or 40 in the App Store right now, but if you just go and look, search for ad blocker, any of the top ones are going to give you a much better battery use and a much better web experience, to be honest, than not having one. So One Blocker, Purity, any of those are great.
Okay, good to know. I've kind of turned off ad blockers because sometimes they mess with content, and of course we won't go down the rabbit hole of just are you supporting the websites or not. But that makes me, especially for travel, makes me think, okay, right. I might just turn them back on.
Right. I know a lot of people who they allow ads on their desktops, or their laptop, but they turn them off on their phone for this reason. So, and another one that we were actually interested in is streaming music. And there's Apple Music, there's Google Play Music, there's Spotify, Pandora, all these apps. Streaming music has become sort of the number. I think it actually has become the number one way to people listen to music in the United States now. But the issue with that when you're on your phone is that whenever you're streaming music, the phone's doing all of its normal stuff, but it also has to keep a continuous internet connection to stream that music, which uses power. And so we tested how much how much energy it uses to stream a playlist of songs versus if you had downloaded that same list of songs to your phone and played them directly. And it turns out that streaming uses twice as much energy, and over the course of say an hour or two. And so another easy way, if you belong to Apple Music, for example, or Spotify Premium or Google Play Music, they all will let you take a playlist and download it directly to your phone and then play it from the phone later. So if you download your playlist, the stuff you're going to listen to while you're at home connected to power over Wi-Fi, and then listen to it directly off your phone when you're out, you'll get twice half of the battery usage while listening.
Yeah, that one doesn't surprise me, and I still don't completely understand why, especially if you've gone to the trouble of buying and the expense of buying a large storage phone, why you don't do that. I want to clarify that. Did you do any tests on? I'm going to download these 3 albums on Wi-Fi using my battery versus just streaming them. Is that a comparable experience, or is it more efficient?
You mean downloading while you're on battery power?
Yeah.
We didn't test that one. My guess is that you'd still get better battery usage by downloading them first and then listening to them from the phone than by streaming them, because by downloading them, you're only using your internet connection during the time when you're downloading. So, maybe it takes a few minutes to download, 15, 20 songs, and then you're listening directly off of the phone's own storage rather than maintaining a network connection the entire time you're listening.
Yeah. I've had the same experience with podcasts more than music, that download them. Occasionally you'll miss one and say, oh, I'm going to stream it. And yeah, if it's a long one, or if you listen to too many streamed, it's a big battery hit.
Right.
Go back to the screen for just a second. I'm curious about this, myth or fact. Is it better to have a dark background on my screen? Does it suck less battery because I'm not having to generate color or light or anything?
As I understand it, if you have an OLED screen where black is off, like a pixel is off when it's black, that a black screen will give you better battery life. But on an LED screen, those pixels are still on, so it's not really a big difference at all. And I'm trying to remember this from my notes, because we did actually look into that and investigate that. And I always forget which one is which, LED or LED. But that's, as I recall from memory, I'm sure someone will correct me if I get this wrong. It will make a difference with an OLED screen, but not with an LED.
Okay.
And so, of course, no iPhones have OLED screens yet.
Right.
That's next year, right? That's what they say.
Who knows? Yeah, with the new iPhones, with the larger iPhones, of course, I don't find the battery life is that big a concern anymore, unless I'm traveling or away from a power source. I just don't use up an entire battery again, unless I have, or doing one of the things you were talking about. And when I do that, then I throw one of those little lipstick size battery packs in my pocket or my backpack or whatever, and I'm fine.
Well, yeah, the 6S Plus and the 6 Plus both have, I forgot exactly how much it is, but it's like 40% more battery life, or a 40% larger battery than the 6 and the 6S. And in fact, I know a lot of people who didn't really want a big phone, but they got the 6S Plus or the 6 Plus because of the better battery life. Because they're like, well, it's huge, but I can get all the way through the day and maybe even to the next morning with it. So I'm going to go with the big one. And I'm the same way. I think that for a lot of people, my 6S Plus never runs out by the end of the day. Even if I'm using it all day, it never gets down. I think once in a while I'll get to like 20% or 10% late at night when I've been using it hard that day. But I think for a lot of people, it's worth getting that bigger phone just for the battery life.
This obviously steps way outside the boundaries of the article, but what are your personal thoughts on the new iPhone battery pack from Apple? Does it deserve the beating that it's taking?
No, it looks a little weird. I will say that, and I understand why, but I don't think it looks that bad. I mean, I use the Apple silicone case on my iPhone, and it's really the exact same thing as that, except with a little bulge in the back. And honestly, I mean, it feels thinner in the hand and smaller in the hand than most of the battery packs that look sleeker because they're thick all the way top to bottom. It's really, I think it's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, oh, there's a big bulge there. But then 2 days later, you've forgotten that it even looks like that. It's just, that's just what it is. But the nice thing about it, we review these, and for the last couple of years, we have picked some really nice, well-performing, inexpensive packs as our top picks for iPhone batteries. I think right now the current one is like an Anchor Ultra Slim that offers a little more power than the Apple one for around $30, whereas the Apple one is like $100. But I will say that the Apple one has some really nice features that we actually included it. We didn't expect to, but we ended up including it in our guide as sort of an upgrade pick for people who like those features. Just being able to see right on the lock screen the charge level of both the phone and the charger. and the battery. The fact that there's no on-off button, it just works. You don't have to worry about, wait, did I turn the battery on or off? It has some extra circuitry built in the battery that gives the phone better reception with the battery pack on, because that's a big concern people have, that they put on a battery pack and their reception may not be as good. So this one kind of solves that, because by adding sort of an antenna in the battery itself. So I actually think that it's gotten kind of a bad rap, and it's a much better battery than most people think it is, if they can look past the hump.
Yeah, I've had one in my hand now. I have a 6S Plus, excuse me. So it really doesn't apply to me. But I've had one in my hand, and if anything, I think it's very comfortable in the hand.
It is,
and that's it may not be gorgeous, but on the other hand, like you said, unless you want to turn your nice, very sexy thin iPhone into a brick, the hump is the only way to go.
Yeah, the look is a matter of opinion, but there's no denying the convenience features of it, and the fact that it's designed by Apple means that it can do some things in terms of integration with the OS that other ones can't. So there's definitely, maybe it's not for you, and it is expensive, but it also has some appealing things too. It's actually a pretty good case.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by ProXPN, the virtual private network service. Protect your internet by securing your connection, and get up to 50% off by visiting proxpn.com and using the offer code VOICES. Security and privacy issues have been dominating the news in the last few weeks. Lots of discussions, both theoretical and practical, about who's entitled to see your data, under what circumstances they can see it, and even something as basic as, do you have a right to privacy? I'm not going to get into that here, or at least not from the law enforcement or legal angles. That's for judges and lawyers to hash out with input from the citizens. What I do know is that you want as much privacy and security as you can get when surfing the web, and that's why you need ProXPN. The bad guys are getting more and more sophisticated in trying to steal your information and your identity. You can usually feel pretty comfortable at home, but when you're out and about, either sipping coffee at the neighborhood cafe or sipping coffee at a cafe 2 continents to the right, you don't want to let all that information go unprotected. With ProXPN, You have 2048-bit encryption key and 512-bit encryption tunnel security to keep your bank transactions, your health information, and even your love letters safe from prying eyes and prying computers. With ProXPN, you can surf anywhere in the world and appear to be coming from pretty much anywhere else in the world. You may be sitting in rural America, but you can appear to be surfing in from London, or New York, or Hong Kong. That can make a big difference in who might be monitoring your activities, and even affect what services you have access to. ProXPN is so serious about privacy and security that they don't retain their logs, so there's nothing for anyone to get. They even accept Bitcoin in payment if you're among those looking for ultimate anonymity. You can try ProXPN for free right now by visiting proxpn.com and signing up. Once you're sure that their service is right for you as you use your Mac, iPhone, or iPad away from home, use the offer code VOICES to get a year of their premium service for 50% off. That means for the next year, you can travel your city, state, or the world, connecting to Wi-Fi hotspots wherever you find them, secure in the knowledge that whatever you're doing, only you know about it. That's proxpn.com and the code VOICES to get 50% off safety and security in your web surfing for a year. Don't wait, do it right now. Thanks to ProXPN for their support of MacVoices. So we've kind of talked the iPhone thing to death. I want to make sure that folks go to the Wirecutter, read that article if you're looking for all the tips. Because
and there's also, I should interrupt to say,
please.
There's also, we talk about what you should do, but there's also a section in there about what you shouldn't do. And a lot of these are things that people recommend or they see on Facebook, like you should do this, that we tested and found out that they really don't help, and sometimes they actively hurt. So if you go read the article, that's actually kind of an entertaining part to go down to the end and say, oh, I shouldn't do those things. Okay.
Okay, give me, you set me up. Give me a couple that you shouldn't do.
The big one is close background apps. Go into the task switcher and force quit any apps you aren't using, because that'll save battery power. The truth is that for the vast majority of apps, it's not going to make a difference. And in fact, over the long term, it actually probably uses a little more battery power, because whenever you force quit an app, you're telling the OS you can purge this app completely out of memory. And then the next time you need to use it, it actually has to load all that in rather than just resume it from a suspended state. So that's a minuscule amount, but over time, over a bunch of apps, it could add up to be a little bit of battery usage versus no savings at all. So there are exceptions. If something's running in the background, sometimes as a troubleshooting task, you may find out that a particular app is using tons of battery when it's not supposed to be. So it's kind of like repairing permissions in OS 10. You shouldn't do it all the time, but if there's a problem, then it might help fix a problem. But so that was a big one, and that's we found that one because we saw all these Facebook posts and how-to posts around the web that said close background apps to make your battery last longer. Things like turning off Bluetooth. We found that when there's a device actively connected, say you're actively connected to a speaker and streaming music, sure, that's going to use battery power. But if Bluetooth is simply on with a bunch of stuff paired but nothing actually working at the time, then it really uses minimal power, and the inconvenience of turning it off in most cases outweighs the minuscule battery savings you'll get. So there's a bunch of things like that we actually tested to see what they actually did, and then realized that they didn't do much at all.
I have to ask, because the one that I find, and I don't use Facebook that much, but if I have the app open, it does seem to suck battery power. Is that a myth, or is that accurate?
It's not a myth. And in fact, there I don't know if you remember, a few months back, there was a controversy because Facebook was, they were sort of faking playing music in the background so that they could keep the app active. And so what was going on is it was kind of like playing a silent audio in the background all the time, just so the app could stay active, because if it didn't, then iOS would suspend it. And so people were finding that it was making Facebook use tons of background power. And then Facebook claims that they submitted an update that fixed it. But the truth is that maybe they fixed that particular issue, but like you said, a lot of people find that Facebook uses a lot of energy in the background. And so I, for one, have actually deleted the Facebook app, and I use the web app on my phone just because of that reason. And I've talked to some Android people, and in fact, some of our testers, when we did this article, found the same thing, that recently the Android app has been bad at it too. So it's not just iPhone and it's not just you. It is it's an issue that Facebook has with their apps. They use a lot of energy in the background.
Is that to try to keep information in front of your face, or is it just questionable coding?
Honestly, I don't know. Some conspiracy theorists may say that it's Facebook's tracking everything you do in the back. I really don't know. I think maybe a little of both. Maybe it's a good question. Whatever the case is, it's clearly using more energy than it should, and it's something that I hope they fix soon.
Yeah, I hadn't even gone down the conspiracy theorist road.
How can you not? You live on the internet. How can you not be conspiracy theorists?
Well, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Note to self: remove Facebook app.
No, but yeah, for me, I removed it just because the web app. I mean, a web app actually works. In some ways, it works better because when you're viewing, I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you're in Facebook, if you go to an article and you want to share it, you have to use like Facebook. You have to share it on Facebook, and if you want to share it like through Twitter or email or something, you actually have to open it in Safari and then share it because Facebook won't let you share any other way, right? If you use the web app, it's just a web page, and so you can share anything you view on Facebook or that you've gotten from Facebook, your normal ways. So, in a lot of ways, I actually like the web app better than the app.
Right, quick, because save us both some email. Walk us through real quick the process of making Facebook into a web app. Well,
you just go to the facebook.com, log into your account, and then you do you tap the share button, and there's an option in the share sheet that says, save, or what is it? Now I've forgotten the name of it. It's basically put it on the home screen.
Right.
Do you remember what the actual?
Not exactly, but yeah, you're right.
Save to home screen.
Yeah.
Like that. And it basically just puts an icon on your home screen that when you tap it, opens Facebook, the Facebook webpage in Safari.
But you're not. Well, yeah, I guess you are in Safari, but not. It's like a second copy almost of Safari.
No, nowadays it actually opens directly in Safari itself.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Does this mean Steve Jobs was right after all this time, that apps are not the way to go? Web apps are?
There's some good apps out there. I just think right now Facebook isn't one of them.
Yeah. Dan, talk for a second about the review process at the Wirecutter. I said in the intro that you guys really go deep in everything. How long does it take you to evaluate some of the products you do?
It really depends on the product and how complex it is and how much testing is required. For those who've never visited the Wirecutter or Sweet Home, which is our sister site, Wirecutter does tech-oriented products and outdoor stuff, and Sweet Home is home goods, appliances, linens, brooms, ice scrapers, anything that focuses on the home. Our goals at Wirecutter and Sweet Home are really to make it so that you don't have to waste your time shopping. Instead of having to go to a bunch of different websites and search for reviews of a particular thing, say a $500 TV, and then comparing those reviews and trying to make sense of them, we go out and first we do some background research. We have a research team that goes out to look at all the, since to use this example, all the TVs that are around $500, $400 to $600, brand name, off-brand. We look at Amazon, we look at professional reviews, we look at our own contacts and our own knowledge in the area, and we try to find a good number of, we come up with criteria of what we think makes a good TV, the things that it has to have or doesn't need, things that might be useful, and then we narrow it down to say maybe 20 models that we think are worth considering. We eliminate ones that are too expensive for what they offer. We eliminate cheap ones that aren't very good quality, and we come up with this sort of set of things that you might consider. And then we bring all those in, and then we have testing criteria, and we test them and compare them, and we come up with what we think is, we call it the best for most people, which may not necessarily be the most expensive or the best, has the most features, but is a really good value that most people, if they bought that, they'd be completely happy with it, and is going to be a better value overall than everything else. In some categories, the best one might be a higher end model. In some cases, we might find that the best one for most people is an inexpensive one that does everything that more expensive ones do. But the goal is so that you can come to our site, say, I'm looking for a $500 TV. And there'll be a guide there that shows you this is the best one for most people. Here's a good one if you want to spend a little more and get a little better quality. Here's one if you're on a budget. And it's not quite as good, but it's really good for the price. And then we lay out all the testing and everything we've done. So you can come and read the first 4 paragraphs and then click buy and you'll know exactly what to buy. Or you can read 5,000 or 8,000 words explaining exactly why we picked that one. And as well, we also talk about all the ones that we didn't pick and why we didn't pick them. So it's almost it's like Consumer Reports for the digital age, or a personal shopper that you say, I want a new blender, tell me what to buy. And so that's what we do.
I especially like the idea that you talk about why you didn't pick certain units, simply because the reason you didn't pick them may not have any bearing on me, so I need to go back and look at them. Right. I really like this is a very transparent kind of review, and just instead of just saying this is the best, it's like this is the best and why, and these are why we didn't pick some of the others. I used to have a subscription to Consumer Reports, and I gave it up simply because of the WireCutter and Sweet Home. I just find I find I get a lot more depth there.
Well, we actually know a lot of the people at Consumer Reports, and a few people from Consumer Reports actually work for us now. They're still a great publication. They have a different focus, and a lot of their stuff is like for, say, appliances. They'll get every single model in, and then they'll rate each one on a scale, and then they give you a table that shows how everything rated. And they may say a best buy here or something like that, but it's a little bit different approach where we pick the ones that we think are going to be candidates to be the best one, test them all against each other, and then try to find the one that's the best value for most people. But the competition section is interesting because it's funny. I think it originally started because so many of us as reviewers were familiar with the situation where they published a review and said, this is the best blah, blah, blah. And then the first 15 comments were, well, what about this one? You didn't review this one, or why didn't you pick this? And so we try to sort of head that off and say, here's all the ones we tested. Here's the ones that we didn't test to begin with. And if it didn't have this, this, or this, we didn't even bother because we think you should have that. And here's all the ones we did test and why we didn't pick them. But the interesting thing is that a lot of those, like you said, the competition ones, maybe the reason we dismissed it doesn't apply to you. And so we will say in there, we didn't pick this one because of this, but if you don't need that, this is really good and you might be considerate. So the main gist of it is we're trying to save you from having to do all that thing. And it's funny because as a reviewer and as someone who's been evaluating products for a couple decades, I could go out and figure out the best, iron for our house. But I'm sure you're familiar with this, that like when you've been working the whole day with technology or with products or whatever, the last thing you want to do is go home and spend 6 more hours researching irons. So it's funny that a lot of our most ardent fans of WireCutter and Sweet Home are people who themselves are really picky or even product reviewers themselves, and they're kind of like me where like, okay, I'll do my own homework for a laptop, but man, when it comes to a new washer and dryer, just tell me what to buy because I don't want to deal with all the, all the process.
Yeah. And I think that it's hard for folks to appreciate the fact that you really need to research so many of these things because there's nothing worse than, I think you said almost in jest earlier, a broom. But if you pick up 10 brooms, you are going to have a favorite. Why? Well, that can be a whole nother discussion. So you all go through when you do these reviews and you tell me what those little annoyances are or what those little niceties are that I need to pay attention to. And I love that because that's often the differentiating aspect of a purchase.
It's funny you mentioned brooms because our broom reviewer...
you have a broom reviewer?
Well, we have houseware reviewers and they tend to review a bunch of different things in that category. And there are sometimes when we don't have an expert on staff. And so for a particular thing like brooms. And so we get someone on staff who, they have enough background in reviewing that they can review pretty much anything. And then we send them out and they learn what makes a good broom and they become experts at brooms. And then they go review them. And our broom reviewer, she spent, I don't know how many hours literally counting the bristles on brooms to come up with bristle density, because they found that in terms of the effectiveness of the broom, the denser it is and the material it's made of make a huge difference. And so in addition to real world tests, sweeping, they actually did bristle density counts. And we were all laughing when she was explaining how she did the whole review, of just picturing her sitting there hours on end counting the bristles in every broom. We do it all for you.
I love it. I love it because it's so geeky that it's going to appeal to us, but there's a good reason for it. It's not just done for the sake of bristle density, but there's a real reason.
Right. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you used that example, because I did forget that often I see names on there. You have a little section in each review about why you should trust us. And then the reviewer is giving their credibility, either their background or, as you said, how many hours they spent and how they did the reviews. So this is just a totally transparent process that if you're really into something and you're going to spend money on it, you might as well take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's funny, that section is kind of polarizing, because we've started putting that section in there because a lot of times you go to on the web, you do a search for, review of a DVD player, and someone reviews it, but you have no idea who that person is or what their experience is. And so we, like you said, we wanted to be transparent. So in our DVD review, it'll say why you should trust us, and it'll give the name of the person, and it'll explain all the things, that the experiences they have in that area and why they're good, why they're equipped to do this review. But some people don't like that section at all. We get comments occasionally from people saying, it feels like you're bragging. I don't want to read about this. I just want to tell me what to buy. So not everyone loves it.
Wow, that's interesting. I would never have thought of it from that standpoint. I want to know. We're going back to the conspiracy theory. Are you getting somebody's getting paid under the table to recommend brand X or brand Y? I'd much rather have somebody tell me who they are and why they should be trusted.
Yeah.
So
you would think, but some people just don't like it. So
yeah,
they can skip that section.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. It's clearly marked off. So yeah, just skip over it. Dan, this has been a lot of fun. We got to do this more often. I'm going to corral you a lot more often. Come back, talk about the Wirecutter and what you're doing, and bring some of your Wirecutter friends, and we'll have a party.
Sure, be happy to.
Or something. I don't know. What are you working on now? Or can you talk about it? I shouldn't.
We've actually spent the last couple of weeks doing reviewing each other. So that's our secret right now. Every year we review each other, and the best editor for your article would be. No, we've got a bunch of stuff in the works. We've been doing a lot of collaborations. This one with the New York Times was our second in this series. The previous one was on the best home router to improve your network. And so we're going to be doing these every couple months. We have some collaborations with other publications. We're doing Engadget and Gizmodo are syndicating us now too, as well as some other news magazines and websites. And then apart from that is just, the normal, trying to cover as much of the stuff that people want to buy as possible.
Yeah. And again, just to restate it too, with the Wirecutter, you're talking primarily about tech kind of things, electronics, but not strictly Apple oriented. With Sweet Home, it's kind of anything is fair game that might show up in the home, and both sites are fantastic. They really are. They will save you money. They might even cost you a little money, but they'll definitely save you money and get you better products in the long run.
Well, thank you. And that's kind of a running joke at the Wirecutter and Sweet Home, is that we end up spending more by working there. Because we see the guides first, and we're like, "Oh, that's great! I love that. I'm gonna go buy one." So we end up, buying more of our stuff than I think most of our readers do. Yeah. I actually just bought our pick for the best electric car. So that's eating your own dog food.
What's the best electric car?
Yes.
Wow.
We have a car section. So we actually do have picks for a lot of different car categories, and it's kind of the same thing. We have a couple people who are longtime vets of the car industry and car reviewers, and they did the same kind of thing, except Wirecutter style, except with cars. They went out and they looked at for this particular one, all of the electric cars, and figured out what makes a good electric car, and they tested all of them and compared them, and then came up with a top pick and then a couple alternate picks. And then just like their other Wirecutter stuff, here's why we picked, here's all the research we did, here's the other ones and why we didn't pick them. So my wife and I got the top pick for an electric car, and so far we've been really happy. So the car guys are good too.
Yeah, that is eating your own dog food and the bag and the bowl and everything at that level of purchase. Okay, what car? What electric car?
It's a Kia Soul EV, the electric version of the Kia Soul. And it's really, we didn't even think about it until our car people. I called them up one day and I'm like, okay, I know this is a perk of working there, by the way. I know you're looking at electric cars. You've been testing all of them. We're just starting to think about this. What do you think? And talked to him for like an hour-long phone call. Like, what are you looking for? Here's, what do you need it for? What range needs do you have? And then he's like, well, this is going to be our top pick, and I think it'd be good for you. And we went out a couple of days later and looked at it, and we were like, wow, this is actually really good, and ended up getting one. Wow. So it's kind of like having your own car reviewers on staff is actually it's a perk for working there.
Yeah. And you also have an idea of what's being evaluated. So if you need to delay a purchase,
Oh, you should have seen the spreadsheets that they use to do all this stuff. Because right there, when you have a car, the specs and the options and the packages and all this stuff is so much more complex than if you're buying a blender. And so they had just massive spreadsheets comparing all these things, weighting them, giving them ratings, and trying to come up with some objective scoring system. And I was like wading through this, and it was like, it was like a geek looking through the old computer shopper catalogs. I'm like, wow, this is great. And it was fantastic. So it really, that was the first. We've been publishing these car guides for a while, and it was the first time I actually had a vested interest in them, and it made me go back and like look at some of the other ones, and I was like, wow, these are really good. I like them.
I didn't think about that until you just said that. With this kind of situation, these kind of reviews, there are no standards. You pretty much have to invent your standards and your method of comparisons, trying to quantify something instead of just saying, oh, I really like this or I really like that.
Well, and the thing is that any reviewer, they do the same thing, right? Anytime you read a review online, that reviewer has, whether they state them or not, they have specific criteria for what they think makes a good X, and then they evaluate that product based on those. I think the big thing that we do is we try to make that all transparent, as you mentioned earlier, where we lay it all out and say what makes a good iPhone case, what makes a good ski boot, and then we lay out exactly what we're using to quantify it, and then you as the reader can say, okay, that seems like a good set of criteria. I can trust this guide. If you think it's a bad set for your specific needs, then you can not read the guide, and you're no worse off. It's not like when you read a review and you buy something and then you get it home and you're like, wow, this is terrible for me because I guess they had different criteria than I did.
Yeah, we definitely have to have you come back, because the iPhone battery thing was great, and I'm glad we got into some of this. So this can be our background for future discussions about this. This is the kind of thing that Dan and the team at WireCutter approach. Now let's talk about some of the products.
Now that you know the inside baseball of Wire.
Yeah, we needed that. Dan, what's the best place for folks to find you? You're obviously writing at the WireCutter. Social media, any preferred presences? I'm just Dan Frakes on Twitter. I have a website that I haven't updated in a while, so you can ignore that for now. But and then the WireCutter.com and the SweetHome.com. Great. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here. No, thanks. Thanks for having me. We should definitely do this sooner rather than later. We will. I'll be pestering you. Okay. Take care. All right. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacNotables on MacVoices. We'll get Dan back a lot more often, and the whole team back, as well as everything else. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.